Well, good afternoon, fellow constitutionalists, and welcome to the Thursday. Actually, it's it is a Thursday. Woohoo, man. My days are mixed up. I had a little issue this morning. Welcome to the Thursday edition of the Dan Clements Show, a Christian political talk show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior fighting for your right just to be an American. It is August 10th in the year of our Lord 2017. Remember, we're a hyphen-free, PC-free zone. God is still in control. He does love you. And I'm broadcasting live from the Hemlock Studios here in the beautiful central Susquehanna Valley in the great Keystone State. And it's going to be a warm day out today. Typically, August is a warm month, but this month it's more like a mid to late fall. So I'm glad for the heat. Going to get the grass mowed this afternoon. Got a birthday party to go to, and then horseback riding for my daughter. So my day is full. I'm feeling great this morning. I'm feeling energetic. I'm still having a little bit of issues with the fatigue, but like I think they're going to go away the more I get exercise and therapy. I really do believe that. So that's what I'm hoping. I do apologize for the start of the show, having to restart the music. About a half an hour before the show, I was checking everything, and I had volume through my open broadcaster on my production computer. But when I started the show, it wasn't there, so I had to stop, close open broadcaster, and start it back up. So I'm going to have to go back in and redo the video on YouTube. But what's great about that is I finally figured out how to use the editing tools on, or basically use the editing tools on YouTube. So I can go in and redo the front end of the show so it doesn't look so bad on YouTube. And of course, as always on Blog Talk Radio, and I want to thank everybody that's listened to me over at Blog Talk Radio. I'm still getting, for me, it's a huge response, a lot of listeners. So I want to thank all my listeners at Blog Talk Radio and apologize in the beginning. There's a lot of things I'm going to be showing today that you can only see on YouTube. Now, I'm going to be reading the ideological echo chamber. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read highlighted parts of it, and we're going to talk about it. So that's going to take most of my show today. Hopefully, you won't get discouraged over there at Blog Talk Radio. You're still going to hear me talk about these things, but my YouTube audience will be able to actually see the document as we're going through it. Excuse me. I have that all set up. It took me a little bit to figure that out last night. But I got it working, and it works fantastic. And at least we're crossing our fingers that it works really good. So anyway, let's get started on the show here. Just trying to. I don't want to miss anything today. I really don't. So today's show not being brought to you by Rocky Mountain High Brands, but they are the official drink of the Dan Clements Show. And being the official drink of the Dan Clements Show, I actually own stock in them, full disclosure. They're part of my retirement portfolio. So the more you guys help spread the word about Rocky Mountain High Brand hemp-infused drinks, 100 milligrams per 16 ounces of these drinks. I drink one a day. It seems to help with my pain. And last weekend it was proof because I forgot to drink one Saturday, and I didn't drink one earlier on Sunday, and it wasn't until Sunday afternoon that I had a moment of clarity and said, man, I haven't drank my Rocky Mountain High for 2 days. No wonder I'm in so much pain. And I really was. Saturday and Sunday I was in a lot of pain. And I never thought about it. And so dummy me, right? So this is the official drink of the Dan Clements Show. They have iced tea, mango energy, berry energy, put your lime into coconut energy. Lemonade is which I drink because it doesn't have any caffeine in it. Only 16 grams of sugar in these cans. I mean, versus another soft drink or energy drink that has sugar in it. They normally have anywhere, the energy drinks have somewhere close to 60 grams of sugar for 16 ounce. Whoa, that's way too much sugar. They have energy shots. So if you want to help out, the DanClementsShow.com, the only place right now on the East Coast you can get them, in most places, is you go to Amazon and order them, and it takes about a week to get them. Right now, I just finished up the one case I have. I have a second case standby, so payday's tomorrow. We're going to order another case, so I still have a full stock on. I'm not going to run out of it, so don't worry about that. I have two Bible verses today, and again, today I picked these two Bible verses to correspond with what we're going to be talking about today. And I actually entitled the show, Ideological Echo Chambers Are Bad for Everyone. And this is all, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, it's all about the Google a memo by, let's see who this is, James, I keep forgetting his name for some reason, James Damore. Okay, so it's this memo that was sent out by James Damore, and it has caused on both the old paradigm, the left and the right, it has caused a firestorm. And I read through this, skimmed through it the other day, read through it a little bit last night, read through it fully the second time, all 10 pages on a PDF document. It took me about 15 minutes to read through it, and then I went through and highlighted some of the stuff that I thought was important, that he made some really good points on. And but especially the anti-freedom crowds out there are just going ballistic over this and trying their best to denounce everything that's said in here and you know, look at Google as a good company. But we're going to get into that. So I got two different Bible verses. One is found in the book of Acts chapter 10 verses 34 through 35. Now this is in the section of scripture talking about the conversion of Cornelius, the Roman centurion. And opening his mouth, he said, and this is Peter, and this is after all these things had happened, the Holy Spirit coming down on him, his visions in Joppa before he came over there. I most certainly understand now that God is not one to show partiality, but in every nation, the man who fears him and does what is right is welcome to him. So God doesn't show partiality, which means, what do you mean? God is merit-based? Now, you can't earn your way into heaven, and I'm not saying that, and you'll never hear me say that. But once you're a Christian, being a Christian was designed to do good works. That was part of the process of being a Christian. You're designed to do good works, and you have certain talents that you're naturally blessed with, and other talents you may have to develop. But you're supposed to use your talents. And God doesn't care if it's a man or woman using their talents. Except for if you keep it within the pattern of Scripture, and I don't want to get too far off base here, but everybody has talents. And God doesn't look at partiality upon anybody, which means he's not a respecter of persons. That he takes everybody as they are. He doesn't look at skin color. He doesn't look at wealth. He doesn't look at any of the idiocies that we have today in society that split and divide society. He doesn't look at those things. He looks at the heart and the intent of man. And so if God is not a respecter of persons, I can't be either. And this whole thing, we're going to get into this memo. This is where all this culture of diversity has come from, because too many people are respecting persons instead of looking at people's heart and looking at their character and looking at their abilities. It doesn't matter what their skin color is or what their gender is. And the other one is found over in Ephesians chapter 4, verses 11 through 12. And he gave some as apostles, and some as prophets, and some as evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers, for the equipping of the saints, for the work of the service, for the building up of the body of Christ. And also, and I'm not going to read this now, but I'm going to give you a little homework. I don't normally give you a lot of homework on this show, but go over and read 1 Corinthians chapter 12, and read that one, and then you can read 13 and 14, which goes, it's this whole thought that Paul puts together here about gifts and the different things that people are doing. And it'll explain in detail. And don't get caught up on the gift itself. Too many people get caught up on like the gift of tongues. Don't get caught up on the gift itself. Look at the ideas behind it and how these things are supposed to be used. Today's quote mail comes from Watchman Nee. I like that name. I don't know who named their kid Watchman, but that's cool. What do I know, right? Outside of Christ, I am weak. In Christ, I am strong. And today's short Bible lesson today comes from Al Shannon over at biblicalproof.wordpress.com. And he posted that today. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Amen. A lot of times we have good intentions of doing things and want to do things, but the flesh gets in the way. And honestly, this whole thing with this Google thing, I believe, goes back to this. You know, I'm talking about some Christian principles here now. You know, I was an elder in the church for a number of years, handful of years, and I could not, as an elder, again, I could not show partiality for one person over another or one group over another. I had to take the whole congregation as a whole. I had to deal with them as a whole. I had to deal with folks as individuals. I didn't get into, and I sort of squashed this whataboutism stuff. Well, what about this person? What about, you know what? The problems we're dealing with are your problems. And these are the things we need to deal with. The situation you have is what we're dealing with. If another situation comes up and it comes to our attention, and we'll go deal with that separately. But let's deal with you right now. Too many people have this whataboutisms going on out there. I'm guilty of this too sometimes. I really am. When it comes, it comes to the election, and the aftermath and everything that Hillary has done. The anti-freedom folks out there are still on this Russian thing. I'm like, I'm done with it. I mean, I'm like, it was false and fabricated to begin with. And in my opinion, that poisons, that's almost like an illegal search warrant. That poisons everything else that's discovered. It does. And there has been nothing to be discovered. I guess they just did a raid on one of the Trump campaign houses, Manafort's. Okay, the FBI did that. I don't know all the circumstance behind it. I don't really want to get into it because, like I said, it's this is fake and fabricated to begin with. Why did President Trump win? Well, Russia helped him. No, literally, figuratively, any other way you want to look at it, other Italy that you want to add to it, Hillary was the worst candidate that the Democrat Party has ever put up, and that's saying a lot because I remember Dukakis. How many people out there remember Governor Dukakis? I think he was from Massachusetts, I think it was. How many remember that guy? Probably not too many. And he was bad. I mean, this guy, Governor Dukakis, he was just out there in left field. I mean, he was out there so far you couldn't see him. And yet, I think Hillary was worse than he was. And that's saying a lot, But like I said, I don't want to get into a bunch of whataboutisms, but I want to get into this memo by James Damore. And let me get this. First off, I always got to put this up. I hate having to put that up. It's like I do it at the beginning of the show, and then as I do stuff during the show, I'll put it up because it seems like I get hit once or a couple times for copyright, but they were copyright. They were actual. But the two other times I got hit and I got everything reversed was I was using a clip and commenting on it. And I emailed them. So I'm using this clip that you're saying is copywritten, and I'm violating it as, I'm commenting on this. And then they finally reversed it, because there's copyright. They have to follow the law. YouTube, even though they're a corporation, they have to follow the law. Okay, now let's get over to this real quick here. I'm hoping everything works out on this today, okay. Okay, there it changed. All right. Looks like everything's working okay over here at my YouTube. Dave says everything sounds great today. Now, if you're on YouTube, you're going to see this. Of course, if you're on Blog Talk Radio, I don't know how you could see it unless you're Superman and got really, really good eyesight, right? X-ray vision and the whole 9 yards. But I will. Hopefully, you've read this or read excerpts of it, or whatever that is. Okay. Google's ideological echo chamber: how bias clouds our thinking about diversity and inclusion, by James Damore. Okay, and this was posted last Saturday. Okay. And he talks about, feel free to comment, they aren't disabled, the doc may just be overloaded, for longer discussion, see, and he has links in here, okay? And basically, he has it set up in 8 different sections. He has one that's reply to public response and misrepresentation, TL and DR, background, Google biases, possible non-biased causes of the gender gap in tech, non-discriminatory ways to reduce gender gap, the harm of Google's biases, and why we're blind, and then also suggestions. And I read through this, like I said, I skimmed through it the first 2 times, and I really dug into it and highlighted things on the 3rd time. Sometimes I don't want to miss things. Okay. Reply to the public response and misrepresentation. And I shared with you yesterday, there's lamestream media publications like the, as Al Levin would call, or Mark Levin, excuse me, Mark Levin would say that the Atlantic Constipation. It's the Atlantic Constitutional. But they are left-wing or anti-freedom as you want to get, right? So, and there's been a lot of this going on because they don't want, anti-freedom groups out there do not want these ideas getting out. This is what diversity is all about, folks. This is exactly what diversity is all about. And, you know, and he tears it apart. And he doesn't do it in a vicious fashion. He doesn't, you know, call people names or anything. He like I do, he attacks the ideas and sets forth good reason arguments for why he's saying what he's saying. But let me get through this reply to the public response misrepresentation. I value diversity and inclusion. I'm not denying that sexism exists and don't endorse using stereotypes. When addressing the gap in representation in the population, we need to look at the population level differences in distributions. If we can't have an honest discussion about this, then we can never truly solve the problem. Psychological safety is built on mutual respect and acceptance, but unfortunately our culture of shaming and misrepresentation is disrespectful and unaccepting of anyone outside of its echo chamber. Despite what the public response seems to have been, I've gotten many personal messages from fellow Googlers expressing their gratitude for bringing up these very important issues, which they agree with but would never have the courage to say or defend because of our shaming culture and the possibility of being fired. This needs to be changed. And yesterday I talked on the show, a lot of Crowder had a chart up there where they did a survey of Google employees, and almost 50% of them either outright said that, you know, agreed with him, or they didn't see anything wrong with it. Didn't really agree with him, didn't see anything wrong with it. 50% of their employees. And let me stop real quick here to say something about this as far as Google is concerned. I think that Google, two things, that they're treading on dangerous ground. They're on a slippery slope right now. And these two things with Google, one is, as we go down through this, you'll see this, they may be, if someone wants to bring a lawsuit against them, they may be in violation of anti-discrimination laws that are on the books now. They may be in violation of that too. They're a corporation, publicly traded corporation with a board and everything. And guess what one of the laws is that they have to follow? And this just, and this makes me laugh with all these anti-freedom folks out there that are socialist and lean that way, you know, economically, politically, everything. They have a fiduciary. They have a fiduciary. That means they have a money responsibility. They have a responsibility to their board and their shareholders to be profitable. They have it's called a fiduciary responsibility. And you go look this up. And if you're a corporation, that's any corporation that's publicly traded, I'm not sure about ones that aren't, but definitely the ones that are publicly traded, they have a responsibility to their shareholders and their board to make money. And that's always been a point of humor for me, that you have these companies like Google that are run at least more towards the socialism end of things than free market capitalism as far as their employees. Now, it's really strange that they actually participate, and they've made their billions of dollars in free market capitalism. I wonder if the snowflakes that work for them actually realize that. I wonder if the snowflakes that work for Google actually realize that's where their paychecks come from. It's not something that just floats down, you know, like manna from heaven. It doesn't work that way. Google has a business model. They put things together. They're a tech giant, the whole 9 yards, and they become very, very profitable off of capitalism. Put that in your echo chamber. Let that float around there a couple times. Oh, my. Anyway, so I just wanted to say that, you know, as we go down through here, is public response and misrepresentation. TL and DR. Google's political bias has equated the freedom from offense with psychological safety, but shaming into silence the antithesis of psychological safety. You know, these ideological echo chambers want to make these safe spaces so that freedom of speech isn't allowed there. They're not allowed to hear divergent ideas because it doesn't fit in their bubble, doesn't fit in their narrative. Okay, so I got to get back over to that. I was scrolling down through there and I noticed I didn't get that back up there. Okay. Now, the silencing has created an ideological echo chamber where some ideas are too scared to be honestly discussed. They're too scared of these ideas. The lack of discussion, this is one of the highlighted points here, the lack of discussion fosters the most extreme and authoritarian elements of this ideology. One, extreme, all disparities in representation are due to oppression. So they're saying that if they don't have enough of an ethnic group or a gender, you know, male or female, that's represented in the company, that it's due because somebody's oppressing these folks. Whatever group they're talking about, they're being oppressed. And that's what he's talking about here. Authoritarian, we should discriminate to correct this oppression. So Google, like I said, it's a wonder they haven't been sued over this yet. They're breaking discrimination laws. Okay? Now, differences in distribution of traits between men and women may in part be explained why we don't have 50% representation of women in tech and leadership. Discrimination to reach equal representation is unfair, divisive, and bad for business. Eventually, I don't care how prosperous Google is, if they continue down this road, somebody else is going to come along that doesn't have these, and I'm just going to say it, these idiotic ideas about diversity, and their business is going to be better. They're going to siphon off the good talent from companies like this that are fed up with this snowflake behavior in these ideological echo chambers like Google has become. And then what is Google going to do? Again, they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders and to their board of directors to make money, to make a profit. Like I said, if there's any socialists out there listening to the program now, they are probably, their heads are probably spinning so fast they can't see. You know, and that has always been the funny part with me, with socialists. They need free market capitalism to create the capital in order to redistribute. And they have no problem having a company working in the free market system. But if you go into that company and try to be diverse with the money and the capital that they have, they're going to fight you tooth and nail for that. They literally are, and they should. They should. But they're living under two standards. You know, the Bible says we can't serve God and mammon. We can't serve God or man, or money, whatever. We can't have two masters. It's got to be one or the other. And so in companies, especially for-profit companies, that's what Google is, you can't have both. It's not going to last long if you continue to have both of these ideas, that you want to be participating in the free market capitalism, but you have all these socialistic ideas when it comes to society and equality and stuff like that. And using discrimination to correct a problem, you're just compounding the problem because now you've broken laws. You've broken laws. And like I said, I'm amazed that they haven't been sued yet over this. I really am. Now the background. People generally have good intentions, but we all have biases which are invisible to us. Thankfully, open and honest discussion with those who disagree can highlight our blind spots and help us to grow, which is why I wrote this document. Google has several biases, and honest discussion about these biases is being silenced by the dominant ideology. What follows is by no means the complete story, but it is a perspective that desperately needs to be told at Google. Google's biases. At Google, we talk so much about unconscious bias as it applies to race and gender, but we rarely discuss our moral biases. Political orientation is actually a result of deep moral preferences and thus biases, and I have to agree with that. You know, and as I've said many times on this program before, that my Christianity, my Christian worldview informs the rest of my life. And as I read those Bible verses to you, knowing that God is not a respecter of persons, he doesn't show partiality, how can I? How can I? And I've worked very, very hard at my biases. Do I have biases? I absolutely do. And they are informed by my morality. My Christian morality, they are informed by. And this seems to be a huge problem in our nation. And I think Google is a fair representation of what's going on in our nation when it comes to diversity of ideas, having echo chambers and anything else like that. Because I believe any type of ideological echo chamber is bad for everybody. I don't care if you're freedom folks. I don't care if you're anti-freedom folks. Even freedom folks, you go too far to the extreme, you live in an echo chamber. You have this set of ideas. And it's okay to have a set of ideas that you've rationed through and you hold up to be true. That's fine. But to never ever allow those ideas to be challenged, that's wrong. That's bad. And that's where we're at today. We have too many people on the anti-freedom side of things out there that think we need to correct these moral biases out there by law. Well, we need to enact these laws to take care of all this stuff. When in reality, the law is not going to do anything. There's never been a law put on the books that stops racism. Never. Sorry. If a person wants to be racist, they're going to be racist no matter what law there is out there. If a feminist wants to discriminate against a man for a job or whatever, there's I don't care what laws you put on the books, they're still going to discriminate against you. Now, they could be taken to task legally, but they're still going to have these biases in their minds against guys or men, and it's not going to change. I'm sorry, it's not going to change by law. Do you know how it changes? It changes by changing people's minds and their hearts. Intellectually. They got to change intellectually, heart, morally. You got to take these things to heart. And so this is these biases that Google has. I didn't realize they had these. Honestly, I knew that they were what they call in the old paradigm left-leaning. I call them anti-freedom, but they're very leaning towards that socialist paradigm. Okay, considering the overwhelming majority of the social sciences, media, and Google lean left, we should critically examine these prejudices. Now, he has of course, Blog Talk Radio, you're not going to see this, but he has a graph here where he has left biases and right biases. We're not going to go over them. I'll let you, and the links to these will be up in the show notes. I forgot to put the link to the PDF that I'm showing you right now. I'll have that in the show notes right after the show. Matter of fact, that's going to be the top. That'll be at the top of the list there, folks. All right. Neither side is 100% correct, and both viewpoints are necessary. And he's talking about these two paradigms they're talking about, I guess I need to explain them a little bit verbally. Left biases, compassion for the weak, disparities are due to injustices. Humans are inherently cooperative. They're open and they're idealistic. Okay, right biases, respect for the strong authority. Disparities are natural and just. Humans are inherently competitive, closed-minded, pragmatic. Those are the biases, okay? So he goes on to say, he says, neither side is 100% correct. Both viewpoints are necessary for a functioning society, or, in this case, company. A company too far to the right may be slow to react, overly hierarchical, and untrusting of others. In contrast, a company too far to the left will constantly be changing, depreciating much low-loved services, over-diversify its interest, ignoring or being ashamed of its core business, and overly trust its employees and competitors. Yes, this is a point I had a little bit of an issue with. On this, I consider myself on the left-right paradigm. I consider myself on the right. But like I said, I'm getting away from that. I'm going freedom, anti-freedom paradigm. I think that's the fair thing here. And I have always been open to new ideas, new, better ways to do things. If you can show me how to do something easier, better, cheaper, so I can make more of a profit, I'm all for it. If you can show me I just use this example, and I know I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say it anyway because it was I was in the situation, I seen it happening, and these are just the facts. In just a short time of being at H.F. Campbell and Sons Trucking, which are no longer in business, so you can't go protest them. I became the head dispatcher. There was a problem with the dispatcher who happened to be female. I'm going to leave names out of it. And she was very, so controlling over every aspect of dispatch that you couldn't breathe in there. Okay? And then something happened between her and the owner, and she was asked to leave. Like I said, I'm not going to get into details. They advanced me over everybody else in the office that had been there for years. The next closest to me was there like 5 months more than I was, as far as seniority. I was junior in the dispatch office when they made me the head dispatcher. And we had at the time they made me a head dispatcher. There's 2 females and there's 2 males in there. And we struggled and struggled and struggled because the old paradigm was still there, and I tried to get folks, I tried to get folks to do jobs and try to get the boss to see that they needed to do jobs they were more readily adapted for. Customer service and stuff. Dispatch is a very hard job. And I'm not saying women can't do it. There are some good female dispatchers out there, but I've known far more very good male dispatchers than I had female dispatchers. And one of the reasons why the good male dispatchers that are out there, and I consider myself one of them, and I'm not patting myself on the back, I was a former driver. So I knew the other side of it. I knew what it meant to drive, go through traffic, make deadlines, deliver, pick up, be on time, be a representative for the company, dress, nice, not dressed up, but, have clean jeans on, a clean shirt, don't look like a ragamuffin, stuff like that. And deal with customers on the driver end of it. So that for me was a natural translation or an easy transfer into the dispatch office and being a dispatcher and actually dealing with the drivers. But the women had a problem dealing with the drivers. They just did. I don't know. I never really sat down and thought about it too much. I think some of it was the drivers not accepting them as women, and that's, whether that's good or bad, okay. But when it came to really, when you had a difficult driver that didn't want to do something, more times than not, when the girls were dispatching, they tried to I'll find some other load for you. But we have this load that's in their area that needs to be picked up, whether they liked it or not. And when I took over as dispatch, we did lose a few drivers because the head dispatcher I replaced, they were her pets. They were her pets. And so you see how this, and I don't know if they were doing it on purpose or not. I really don't. I don't think they had bad intentions. It's just they were bad habits that they had, and they needed to be corrected. When they were corrected, this is what happens. You'll have employees will leave, and Google might have more employees that might just leave saying, you know what, they're going to do this to James. I'm not going to stay around for this. I'm going to find me another job. And we don't know what's going to happen. But we lost another one of the female dispatchers. She had some personal problems she was dealing with and couldn't dispatch, and so we had to let her go. And she was a good dispatcher. She didn't let the drivers walk over her, and I was sorry to see her go, but she had personal issues. And my point is, when, for the most part, on average, I don't go by the fringes. Far too many of these anti-freedom folks want to delegate or rule by the fringes. They want to make laws and all this stuff covering the fringes, and folks, that's not the way you are to be a competitive company. I'm sorry, it's just not the way. And Google, if they don't change their ways, I'm telling you, you can put it on the calendar that I said it August 10th, 2017, that if Google does not change their ways, they're going to take a huge hit, financially, employee-wise, the whole 9 yards. That's just a fact. He goes on to say here, only facts and reasons can shed light on these biases, but when it comes to diversity and inclusion, Google's left bias has created a politically correct monoculture that maintains its hold by shaming dissenters into silence. This silence removes any checks against encroaching, extremist, and authoritarian policies. For the rest of this document, I will concentrate on the extreme stance that all differences in outcome are due to differential treatment and the authoritarian element that's required to actually discriminate to create equal representation. Possible non-biased causes for the gender gap in tech. And he's mainly talking about tech here, okay? At Google, we're regularly told that implicit, unconscious, and explicit bias are holding women back in tech and leadership. Of course, men and women experience bias, tech, and the workplace differently, and we should be cognizant of this, but it's far from the whole story. On average, men and women biologically differ in many ways. These differences aren't just socially constructed because they're universal across human cultures. They often have clear biological causes and links to prenatal testosterone. Biological males that were castrated at birth and raised as females often still identify and act like males. Called eunuchs, folks. Let me just put that term out there. The underlying traits are highly hereditary, you could say. They're exactly what we would predict from an evolutionary psychology perspective. Note, I'm not saying that all men differ from all women in the following ways, but that these differences are just. That means they're right. I'm simply saying that the distribution of preferences and abilities of men and women differ in part due to biological causes, that these differences may explain why we don't see equal representation of women in tech and leadership. Many of these differences are small, and there's a significant overlap between men and women. So you can't say anything about an individual given these population level distributions. And he goes on, has a chart, and we're not going to really get into those charts, but if you're on YouTube, you'll see these charts. I'm scrolling down by these, okay? Personality differences. Women on average have more openness directed towards feelings and aesthetics rather than ideas. Women generally have a stronger interest in people rather than things relative to men, also interpreted as empathizing or systemizing. These two differences in part explain why women relatively prefer jobs in social or artistic areas. More men may like coding because it requires systemizing, and even within SWEs, comparatively more women work on front end, which deals with both people and aesthetics. So even in this tech, and he's a back end guy, he works on the base code that drives everything. And what he's saying here is women are more suitable to deal with the public on the public interface and how it looks to the public than men are. And between me and my wife, that's actually true. That's how things get done. And he goes on and talks about some other things down through there, and he's bolstering his ideas up there about women. And then I just want to, we're going to run out of time if I have to read everything in here. He talks about men's higher drive for status. And folks, I'm not skipping over stuff on purpose here. He just lays out his argument. I think he does a good job in the first couple points, but he expounds on that. You need to go read the document for yourself. Men's higher drive for status. We've always asked why we don't see women in top leadership positions, but we never ask why we see so many men in these jobs. These positions often require long, stressful hours that may not be worth it if you want to balance a balanced and fulfilling life. Status is the primary metric that men are judged on, pushing many men into these higher paying, less satisfying jobs for the status that they entail. Note that the same forces that lead men into higher pay, high stress jobs in tech and leadership cause men to take undesirable and dangerous jobs like coal mining, garbage collection, and firefighting, and suffer 93% of all work-related deaths. And that was a statistic I did not know. Between men and women, men suffer 93% of the work-related deaths over women. That's something. And I don't think that's being a chauvinist. I don't think that's being sexist or misogynist to talk about that. That men do take the more dangerous jobs, on average. I got to stress that. Non-discriminatory ways to reduce the gender gap. And these I'm going to go through, and we're going to talk about these and highlight these. Below, we'll go over some of the differences in distribution of traits between men and women that I outlined in the previous section, suggested ways to address them to increase women's representation in tech without resorting to discrimination. Google is already making strides in many of these areas, but I think it's still instructive to list them. Women on average show a higher interest in people, and men show a higher interest in things. Okay, we can make software engineering more people-oriented with pairing programming and more collaboration. Unfortunately, there may be limits to how people-oriented certain roles at Google can be done, or can be and should be decisive, or shouldn't be decisive ourselves or students, or excuse me, shouldn't deceive ourselves or students into thinking otherwise. Some of our programs to get female students into coding might be doing this. This doesn't mean that we should remove all competitiveness from Google. Competitiveness and self-reliance can be valuable traits, and we shouldn't necessarily disadvantage those who have them, like it's been done in education. Now, this is a good segue into an article I actually have in the, let's see here, New York Times, not New York Times. Oh, here it is. Charter schools. Let me bring this up real quick here. Charter schools boost performance in nearby schools, and this is from the Washington Free Beacon by Brent Schneer, S-C-H-E-R, or Share, however you want to pronounce that. Anti-school choice activists often argue that charter schools expansion hurts existing schools, but a new study in New York City schools found that the new charter schools are increasing the performance of schools around them. What do you mean? You mean competition actually makes things better? Man, you could have fooled me. You could have fooled me. The peer-reviewed statistical analysis conducted by Temple University professor Sarah Cords indicates charter schools are not only helping the students enrolled, but also students at schools that feel pressure to increase performance due to their close proximity to the new charter school. In other words, competition makes things better. It makes things better. And this is an issue in Google. When you're talking about, this doesn't mean that we should remove all competitiveness from Google. Competitiveness and self-reliance can be valuable traits, and we shouldn't necessarily disadvantage those that have them, like has been done in education. Women on average are more prone to anxiety, and that is a societal thing. Women on average look more for work-life balance, while men have a higher drive for status than on average. Men want, and then this is true in my life. I want to take care of my wife and my family. I want to be the breadwinner. But I'm not insecure enough where if my wife is making more money than I am, then I'm going to be mad about that. I'm still contributing. I'm still working hard, and I do. You ask my wife, she takes care of the inside of the house, except for repairs, and does some other hobbies and that. But I take care of the hard work, mowing the grass. When we had the wood furnace, I was splitting the wood, feeding that. She didn't want to do that, and I didn't ask her to do it. The female gender role is currently inflexible. Feminism has made great progress in freeing women from the female gender role, but men are still very much tied to the male gender role. If we as a society allow men to be more, and I don't like this part, but I'm going to give it to you because he was talking about it, be more feminine, then the gender gap will shrink, although probably because men will leave tech and leadership for traditionally feminine roles. And that is the case. Again, I want to reiterate this. I'm not in touch with my feminine side because I don't have one. I have an inner child that I let out and play every now and then, probably more often than I should, but there is no inner woman for me to get in touch with. There is no feminism or female thing about me. And you can ask my wife, there is nothing feminine about me. I'm all boy, I'm all man, I'm all masculine. And she'll tell you that. And you know what? My wife likes that. She does. She doesn't like all this feminist talk about, feminizing men, making them sissy boys. She doesn't like that. She wants a strong man. She wants someone around that can take care of things when things need to be taken care of. All right. Psychologically, I don't think we should do arbitrary social engineering of tech just to make it appealing to equal proportions of both men and women. And that is a good point. Because in order to do that, in order to social engineer the tech, like they've been trying to socially engineer the military, you have to lower standards, which, especially in the military, you shouldn't, and especially in the workplace. Because again, Google, as a publicly traded company, has a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders to make money. So I agree with him. To arbitrarily be socially engineering of anything, to be arbitrary about just so you can make the equal proportions of men and women, is ridiculous on its face. And he goes through and explains why. I mean, it is. Because in order to do that, if you go back to the societal norms, the averages in society, how women are wired different than men on average. And men tend to gravitate towards certain jobs, and women tend to gravitate towards other jobs. That's just the facts. And people think this is a huge problem when it comes to what they call STEM, science and technology and education and math. Women getting into these, and it's great if women want to get into them. I'm not saying they shouldn't, but it shouldn't be forced. It shouldn't be arbitrary. That's where you get into trouble. And again, I'm going to keep a watchful eye on Google. I don't own stock in them, luckily, but I think this is going to turn around to bite them. Now he goes on to say here, he says the harm of Google's biases. I strongly believe in gender and racial diversity, and I think we should strive for more. However, to achieve a more equal gender and race representation, Google has created several discriminatory practices. Programs, mentoring, and classes only for people with a certain gender or race, a high priority queue and special treatment for diversity candidates, hiring practices which can effectively lower the bar for diversity candidates by decreasing the false negative rate, reconsidering any set of people if it's not diverse enough, but not showing the same scrutiny in the reverse direction, clear confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is what I talk about a lot on here. People have a foregone conclusion in their mind, and they're going to cherry pick facts and everything to support that. So they're going to do things to confirm that bias. Okay? These practices are based on false assumptions generated by our biases and can actually increase race and gender tensions. We're told by senior leadership that what we're doing is both the morally and economically correct thing to do, but without evidence. This is just veiled left ideology that can empirically or irreparably harm Google. But they do this without evidence. And this is why you're not hearing a lot from folks at Google and asking for the evidence. And that's, folks, you know what? I do got to stop it here because, we talk about this a lot on this program. When I get in discussion with folks, I got into discussion with a guy yesterday, says he's a former CIA agent. He's on we follow each other on Facebook, and he had a video from Russia Today, which I think they're a pretty good news group, but the reporter didn't call out this guest on this figure. He said in his report that 5 million people died in North Korea during the Korean War. And that's exactly what he said. And then when I pushed the issue with Scott, his name's Scott, I won't give his last name. When I pushed the issue with Scott, I said, I went back and looked, and there was only about 2.5 million military and civilian that were killed in North Korea. And Scott came back and said, no, he said, well, if you look at all the casualties, it was close to 5 million, which it was on both sides, UN, the whole 9 yards. But I said, that's not what he said in the video. He said 5 million North Koreans were killed during the Korean War. And that's just a fabrication. Maybe he misspoke, and I even said that. Maybe he misspoke, and he needs to correct that. But you're going with this information knowing that what he said was wrong, and you didn't correct it in any of your comments. So without any evidence, people run with things. And this is a problem with our society. This is a problem with the Democrat Party. This is a problem with the anti-freedom folks out there, the Democratic Socialists. They run with these things saying this is a good thing for society, but they don't give you evidence for it. Oh, free college. It's a good thing for society. Where's your evidence? Where's your proof that it's a good thing? Not just your ideas saying, well, you know what? If they're not paying for college, they'll, whatever. No. Make your case. Cite your evidence. Do you have any studies that prove that giving kids free college actually benefits them? I bet you there's some out there. Make your case. Just like let America vote. I'm totally against this George Soros funded group, because they're against voter IDs, and they're against purging voter rolls. They're against laws like Pennsylvania have. If you don't vote in a certain amount of elections, local or primary or national elections, you get purged from the voter roll, and then you have to go re-register. That's been a law in the book since I moved here. I think it's a pretty good law. Let America Vote says no, you can't do that. I'm like, why? What's your evidence? What's your argument for why you can't do that? It's not discriminatory. If you just don't want to vote anymore, or you're too lazy or too apathetic, whatever it is, pick your two. You pick that out. It's way too many people out there accepting things without evidence, folks, and it boggles my mind that we got to a point in our society where we can listen to ideas and say, yeah, they're pretty good, but then when you're challenged on them, and this is why these echo chambers, especially these ideological echo chambers, I don't care if you're in a freedom camp or you're in an anti-freedom camp, this is why they're bad, because no matter what evidence you bring to them, you can't get in that echo chamber. You just cannot get in that echo chamber. Why we're blind. Now, these things about Google. We all have biases and use motivational reasoning to dismiss ideas that run counter to our internal values. Just as some on the right deny science that runs counter to the God, humans, environment hierarchy. And folks, I got to stop here, and I'd love to interview him about this, because the right does not deny science. We want, again, he just talked about evidence up there. We want evidence. And again, and we'll go back to the climate change here real quick. I know I'm winding down on my time here, but we'll go back to the climate change thing here real quick. When so many things, and I bring them up every now and then. Matter of fact, I think I have do I have something again? Yeah. Eric Wimple over the Washington Post has an article, New York Times guilty of large screw-up on climate change story. They fabricated another story about climate change. East Anglian University over in England fabricated and misled with information. Penn State here in Happy Valley out here in Center. My mind's all messed up. You know Penn State, okay? The Nittany Lions. And State College, over in State College in Center County, I want to say. They were caught along with East Anglian of fudging the numbers. Duke. Again, studies that were fudging them. Australia, I just shared an article with you last week about this. Fudge the numbers. You know, they want to mess things up. And it's more, again, folks, and not that I want it to be this way, but it seems like the anti-freedom folks out there, the socialists, want to lie about these things because they want to control things. And so I do disagree with him that the right denies science. We don't. Even myself as a Christian, I don't deny science. I think the Bible supports science. I think whenever the Bible is not a book of science, but whenever it talks about science, it's accurate. Whenever it talks about history, it's accurate. So I do have a disagreement with that. And he says the left tends to deny science concerning biological differences between people, IQ, sex differences, all that kind of stuff, which they do. Okay. Thankfully, climate scientists and evolutionary biologists generally aren't on the right. Unfortunately, the overwhelming majority of humanities and social sciences lean left, about 95%, which creates, and he has links all into these too, folks, which creates enormous confirmation bias, which means they already have a conclusion in their mind, and that's what they're going to go with. And he goes on, I only got into page 7. We're not going to go much further over this. You can go down and read through this. Hopefully I gave you a good look into this and a good idea of, let me see where, I'm pretty sure his name's James. James Damore is his name. Hopefully you got a pretty good idea where James is coming from on this. And is it an anti-diversity memo? I would have to say yes. I would have to say it is, because diversity is defined what it is today by the anti-freedom folks is what he's talking about. Now I have a diversity in my retirement account, my 401k, and other investments. I am totally diverse, and that's a good thing. But the thing is, when you're talking about inanimate objects and you have biases, that's okay. But when you're talking about folks and you have biases, that's not okay, because maybe you're wrong about this person that you're talking about. Maybe, just maybe, they're not the person you think they are, but because you're in this ideological echo chamber and they're coming from an area that you don't agree with, then you're not going to change your mind about it. And that's bad. Folks, that is truly bad. I mean, that is really, really bad. So we have to be careful of that. We really, really have to be careful of that, and we have to be mindful of that. And as a Christian, I have no business. I really, truly try to work on my biases when it comes to interacting between people. If I have a bias towards a certain vehicle or something like that, that's different. That's totally different. That's more of a preference bias. But I try not to have a confirmation bias. I try not to have conclusions without reasoned, debatable, searchable, knowable things. I refuse to do that. But we see here that Google, they don't refuse any of that, and that's a shame. And that company, it's good. I think they got a good business plan, but it's not going to hold together long if they hold to these things that James is talking about here. These problems that Google has with this diversity, and actually possibly breaking a couple laws here, one fiduciary and one discriminatory. Folks, that's the music. This has been the Dan Clements Show. I'm your host, Dan Clements, your constitutional warrior. Remember, if you aim at nothing, hit it every time. Have a great rest day, and God bless, and we'll see you tomorrow at noon for Free for All Friday. Looking forward to it tomorrow.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.